Welcome to Time Traveler. Double the pressure.
In January 3rd, 250, sacrificed to the gods. Decius became Roman emperor in 249 as a result of military victories. He made efforts to revive Rome's golden age, adding the name of one of his most admired predecessors, Trajan, to his own, revived the ancient office of censor and restored the Colosseum. Restoration of traditional Roman piety was another of his aims, and after performing the annual sacrifice to Jupiter on January 3, 250, he issued an edict, the text of which is lost, ordering sacrifices to the gods to be made throughout the empire. Jews were specifically exempted from this requirement. 1496. Leonardo da Vinci failed his flying experiment. A true Renaissance man, Leonardo da Vinci had talents in arts, sciences, music, and engineering and managed to combine his gifts for extraordinarily creative work. In January of 1496 he unsuccessfully tested a flying machine. 1521. Martin Luther excommunicated. Pope Leo X issues the papal bull De Set Romanum Pontificum, which excommunicates Martin Luther from the Catholic Church. Martin Luther, the chief catalyst of Protestantism, was a professor of biblical interpretation at the University of Wittenberg in Germany when he drew up his 95 Theses condemning the Catholic Church for its corrupt practice of selling forgiveness of sins. 1653. Cunan Cross Oath. The Cunan Cross Oath, also known as the Great Oath of Bent Cross, the Leaning Cross Oath or the Oath of the Slanting Cross, taken on the 3rd of January 1653 in Mattancherry, was a public avowal by members of the St. Thomas Christians of the Malabar region in India, that they would not submit to the Jesuits and Latin Catholic hierarchy, nor accept Portuguese dominance in ecclesiastical and secular life. 1749. Berlingske. Berlingske, previously known as Berlingske Tidende, is a Danish national daily newspaper based in Copenhagen. It is considered a newspaper of record for Denmark. First published on the 3rd of January 1749. 1777. Battle of Princeton. On January 3, 1777, Continental Army soldiers under the command of General George Washington defeated a force of British troops near Princeton, New Jersey. The action was part of a larger campaign to regain momentum following a string of defeats in the New York City area throughout the summer and fall of 1776. 1815. Secret Treaty of Vienna. The Secret Treaty of Vienna was a defensive alliance signed on the 3rd of January 1815 by France, the Austrian Empire and Great Britain. It took place during the Congress of Vienna, negotiations on the future of Europe following Napoleon's defeat in the War of the Sixth Coalition. 1834. Stephen Austin imprisoned by Mexicans. President Santa Anna refused to grant Texas separate status from Coahuila, and on January 3, 1834 threw Austin in prison on suspicion of inciting insurrection. Presidents, always more loyal to the United States than to Mexico, the settlers eventually broke from Mexico, with Austin in charge of the troops to form the independent Republic of Texas in 1836. 9 years later, they led the successful movement to make Texas an American state. 1841. Herman Melville sails for the South Seas. Melville was born in New York City in 1819. A childhood bout of scarlet fever permanently weakened his eyesight. He went to sea at age 19, as a cabin boy on a ship bound for Liverpool. 2 years later, he sailed for the South Seas. Melville was born on January 3, 1841. Writer Herman Melville ships out on the whaler Acushnet to the South Seas. 1861. Delaware rejects secession. On January 3, 1861, just 2 weeks after South Carolina became the first state to secede from the Union, the state of Delaware rejects a similar proposal. There had been little doubt that Delaware would remain with the North. Delaware was technically a state where slavery was legal, but the institution was not widespread. 1868. Meiji Restoration begins. In an event that heralds the birth of modern Japan, patriotic samurai from Japan's outlying domains join with anti-shogunate nobles in restoring the emperor to power after 700 years. Soon after seizing power, the young Emperor Meiji and his ministers moved the royal court from Kyoto to Tokyo, dismantled feudalism, and enacted widespread reforms along Western models. 1871. Battle of Bapaume. The Battle of Bapaume was a battle during the Franco-Prussian War, brought about by French attempts to relieve the besieged city of Péronne, Somme. The battle was fought on 3 January 1871 near the town of Bapaume. The Prussian First Army had reached Bapaume at the end of December, while at the same time the French Army of the North under Feuerbach moved out to break the German siege of Péronne. 1885. Battle of Nieuwebrug. The Battle of Nieuwebrug, the 3rd to the 4th of January 1885, was a French victory during the Sino-French War. The battle was fought to clear Chinese forces away from the French forward base at Chu, and was an essential preliminary to the Lang Son campaign in February 1885. The Prussian First Army had reached Bapaume at the end of December, while at the same time the French Army of the North under Feuerbach moved out to break the German siege of Péronne. 1911. Kebun earthquake. More than 450 killed. Damage occurred in the Chongkemen, Bolshoy-Kemen Valley as well as at Ananyevo, Sazanovka, and Oytul, Kyrgyzstan. Over 770 brick buildings were destroyed at Almaty, Verny, Alma-Ata, Kazakhstan. Faulting, fractures and large landslides were observed over an area 200 kilometers (125 miles) long in the Chongkemen and Chilik valleys and along the shore of Lake Issyk-Kul. Hanging objects swung in cities more than 1,000 kilometers (625 miles) away in Kazakhstan and Russia. 1911. Siege of Sydney Street. In the early hours of 3 January, a long file of police officers wound their way through the silent streets of the East End to Sydney Street, which runs from Commercial Road in the south to the junction of Whitechapel and Mile End Roads to the north. On reaching Sydney Street, the police evacuated the houses adjoining number 100 and then the first 2 floors of number 100 itself. By daybreak the stage had been lit for the great drama which was about to unfold over the next few hours. 1913. Atlantic Coast Storm. The January 1913 Atlantic Coast Storm was a strong extratropical cyclone that affected the eastern coast of the United States on January 3, 1913. It resulted in heavy damage due to the high winds and produced record low pressure readings. The lowest confirmed barometric pressure reading, 955.0 mb 28.20 inHg. For a non-tropical system in the continental United States, CONUS was recorded during this storm at Canton, New York. 1920. Jalapa earthquake. The 1920 Jalapa earthquake was the deadliest in Mexico's history prior to 1985, killing at least 648 people. It occurred on January 3 at 22:25 local time, during a period of political unrest in the country. Mud flows and landslides triggered by the shock destroyed buildings in rural towns across Veracruz and Puebla, causing most of the deaths. The earthquake was attributed to a shallow fault in the Trans-Mexican volcanic belt. It measured moment magnitude 6.3 to 6.4 and had a hypocenter depth of less than 15 kilometers (9.3 miles). 1924. King Tut's sarcophagus uncovered. 2 years after British archaeologist Howard Carter and his workmen discovered the tomb of the pharaoh Tutankhamun near Luxor, Egypt. They uncover the greatest treasure of the tomb, a stone sarcophagus containing a solid gold coffin that holds the mummy of Tutankhamun. 1933. Minnie D. Craig. On January 3, 1933, she made history when she was elected Speaker of the House, the first time a woman had led a legislative body in the USA, in a permanent capacity. However, the session proved challenging for Craig. The House assembled in a temporary auditorium as the state capitol had been consumed by fire. In addition, North Dakota was suffering from an agricultural depression caused by drought. 1938. Franklin Roosevelt founds March of Dimes. Franklin Delano Roosevelt, an adult victim of polio, founds the National Foundation for Infantile Paralysis, which he later renamed the March of Dimes Foundation, on January 3, 1938. A predominantly childhood disease in the early 20th century, polio wreaked havoc among American children every summer. The virus, which affects the central nervous system, flourished in contaminated food and water and was easily transmitted. 1944. Gregory "Pappy" Boyington. On January 3, 1944, he tied World War I ace Eddie Rickenbacker's record of 26 enemy planes destroyed, before he was shot down. On that mission, 48 American fighters, including 4 planes from the Black Sheep Squadron, were sent on a sweep over Rabaul. Boyington was tactical commander of the flight and arrived over the target at 8 a.m. He was seen to shoot down his 26th plane, but he then became mixed in the general melee of dogfighting planes and was not seen or heard from during the battle, nor did he return with his squadron. 1946. George Wolfe dies in a freak accident. During the running of the 4th race at Santa Anita Park on January 3, 1946, Wolfe fell from his horse, Please Me, as he rounded the clubhouse turn. Suffering from a concussion, he was taken to the hospital, where he died the following day. The jockeys in the race and the track stewards reported that they had not witnessed any incident during the race to have caused such a fall. Most observers think his diabetic condition may have resulted in his suffering a dizzy spell or fainting. 1947. The first live television broadcast. The first live television broadcast coverage of a congressional proceeding occurred on January 3, 1947, when cameras were allowed into the House chamber to telecast the opening of the 80th Congress. It also was the last such broadcast for more than 3 decades, despite the fact that television became a major cultural phenomenon. 1949. The Bangko Sentral ang Pilipinas. The Bangko Sentral ang Pilipinas (BSP) is the central bank of the Republic of the Philippines. It was established on 3 July 1993 pursuant to the provisions of the 1987 Philippine Constitution and the new Central Bank Act of 1993. The BSP took over from Central Bank of Philippines, which was established on 3 January 1949, as the country's central monetary authority. The BSP enjoys fiscal and administrative autonomy from the national government in the pursuit of its mandated responsibilities. 1956. The Eiffel Tower catches fire. On January 3, 1956, an electrical fire briefly engulfed a top corner of the Eiffel Tower, located in Paris, France, startling tourists stranded on the top and alarming people across the city who had recently heard the news. The fire broke out at 7:21 p.m. in an area off-limits to tourists. 1959. George A. Kazim, member of California's first Arab-American Congress. On January 3, 1959, George A. Kazim takes office in the U.S. House of Representatives for California's 25th District, making history as the first Arab-American congressperson. Kazim, who was a World War II veteran and former lawyer, ran for re-election in 1960, but lost to John H. Rousselet, a Republican. 1987. Rock and Roll Hall of Fame inducts first woman. The category in which the hall is most conspicuously lacking is women. Fewer than 100 female performers have been added since the hall admitted its first woman, Aretha Franklin, on January 3, 1987. In its second 10 years, women fared better with the Hall of Fame as artists like the Jefferson Airplane, 1996, Joni Mitchell, 1997, Bonnie Raitt, 2000, and the Pretenders, 2005, became eligible for induction.